Allied military currency. Towards the end of World War II and for a few years afterwards, we were making currency for use in the various parts of some of the various theaters for World War II, mostly Europe, but also the Far East. We'll start with the German ones. Now, there's a few things to note. The single leading zero on here indicates this was meant for the British portion of Germany. As you may recall, they partitioned up the country as a whole and then also the city of Berlin into 4 different parts for each of the 4 different allies. And so one was to the south was for the America, one to the east was for the Russians, and then if you're talking the city, the northern part would have been for France and the western for England, or if you're talking the country as a whole, the west would be for France and the northern would be English for England. At any rate, it didn't really matter. They're pretty much interchangeable wherever, but this kind of allowed them to keep tabs on what these things were meant for. So you see here the 01 means that this was meant for the British part. Okay, it also has something else here. If you look inside where my thumbnail is, there's a little funny looking letter. It looks kind of like a J. It's actually supposed to be some weird fancy F to indicate that it was made in the United States. Very subtle. They didn't want anybody to notice it was there, unless they knew about it. So this would be 1/2 of a mark. Now this one leads off with a dash. If it leads off with a dash, it is intended for the Russian portion. And in this case, it doesn't have any little mark there. So what happened was we authorized the Russians to make some of these pieces of money as well for Germany. We authorized to do so many, which they proceeded to do. And then they went on to print a whole bunch more, creating an inflation issue. And not all of them probably had the dash on there to tell us that that's what they belong to. You notice they're all series 1944. Most of these are 44. We'll get to one part that's 43. So the dash would have indicated that this one was, it's made in Russia. It doesn't have that little indicator, but it's also meant for the Russian part. It is indicated by the leading dash. Now we get up to 5 marks. And now the 00 means that this was meant for France, even though, once again, the little funny F thing is still there as an indication that that was made in the United States for France. So anyway, or the French part of Germany, I should say, the part of Germany presided over by the French. Now, here we have a 00. That had a 00. Yeah. So this also was meant to be for the portion presided over by the French. Unfortunately, as we get to these larger sizes, I'm not sure what indication, and if so, where it would be for that little F, regardless of whether it was made in the United States or Russia. So, but at any rate, either way, the 00s mean that this is supposed to represent the French quarter. Look at that. Alliierte military Horde. Allied military currency, that is in German. Okay, that's 20. Now you have a single 0, so that's meant to be for the British portion. And that was the 20 mark. You can see they look kind of similar, except that they just kind of expand. As you get up to the 20, you finally arrive at the size of normal American currency. The 50, again, there's a leading 0, so this was meant for the eastern portion of the English portion of Germany. And again, they look pretty much the same on the back. And finally, here's 100. The leading dash means that this one was meant for Russia. And so, anyway, that's 100 marks. And I do note that in most cases there may be higher denominations, but I only took this yay far. Now, another country they did was Austria. Now, this one's a little bit unusual. They still will say Alliierte military Horde, which is still German for Allied military currency. It's also Serie 1944 in Austria, Ausgaben, Anyway, I think what that's meant to say is that this is for the nation of Austria. 50 Groschen. Groschen are kind of like their cents, so that would be half of the next denomination up, which in Austria is a shilling. A shilling. So Ein is 1, series 1944. Very simple design. Did I show the back of this? Let's make sure we get that. Okay. All right. Now, as we go up through the denominations, they will start getting larger. You got a 2 shilling. Okay, and we no longer had to worry about some of these either made in Russia or meant for different portions of Austria like we did with Germany. So it's just pretty straightforward. I'm noticing the smaller denominations didn't seem to have a... Did they have? No. Interesting. The smaller denominations did not have serial numbers. The larger denominations do. So anyway, there it is. That's the 5 shilling. 5 shilling. And here's the 10 shilling. Okay. Then they expand a little bit more. The 20 shilling. Supposedly, reportedly there may be a 25, but I haven't seen any. There's a 50 shilling. And by this time, they're getting pretty large. And then you get up to the 100 shilling. These things are really big. So, it's kind of interesting. All right. We also made some for France. Now, apparently the French ones weren't quite so popular. Even so, we have a couple series of these, but I'll just show the first one. Okay. So that's 2 francs. And again, you still see the Serie Day 1944. And they have the French flag. A second run of these things. The design is virtually identical, except the French flag is replaced with kind of a elliptical white area with some slogans in it. So, I don't know, freedom, equality, fraternity. Anyway, the usual French slogan. There's the 5 francs. That's the back. And then there's the 10 francs. Okay. And then there's the 50 francs. Now we get up to a size that's commensurate with the size of the normal American paper money at the time. So there they are. And there's that. Liberté, égalité, fraternité. Well, you'd have the words by themselves, but without the flag in the second run. But these are all first runs, so they have the flag. There's 100 francs. And the back is pretty standard. And here's the 500 francs. Yeah, reportedly there's also 1,000 francs and even a 5,000 franc, though apparently the 5,000 franc were not put in circulation. I don't even have information on whether or not any of the 5,000 franc notes have even survived, and if so, whether they would exist. Now, Italy comes out a little earlier, series 1943. Probably had something to do with Italy was kind of bowing out of the war a little earlier than Germany. They weren't going to give up their lives to help the Nazis. So, but this is kind of neat. The Italian one: freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom from want, freedom from fear. Allied military currency. Look at that. At least now it reads in English. All right, so issued in Italy. Well, doesn't mean it was printed there. So they have a 1 lira. We have a 2 lira. Seems like that's the same in all of those. We have a 5 lira. Okay. We have a 10 lira. Then we jump up to the full size for the 50 lira. And the 100 lira. Okay. And then the 500 lira. Okay. There's reportedly a 1,000 lira, but they're all pretty much the same basic idea. Now for the Orient, we had a couple of yens. Reason being that even though Japan controlled the Far East, they had pretty much had taken over in Korea for a while, so it was reasonable that yen would be used in Korea. These A yens were in fact used in Korea. As it turns out, well, that's a 10 sen, 50 sen. The sen is like the cent of a yen. And then there'd be the whole yen. Okay. Then we move up to an intermediate size for the 5 yen. And these all have the A's on them because the A series were actually meant for Korea, but it was quickly decided that the Korean money would just be used for that particular time period. Let's see, issued pursuant to military proclamation. That's kind of interesting. And 20 yen. The A yens are actually fairly rare because, as I said, they were in use there for the shortest period of time imaginable, and then when it was deemed not useful, they gathered them up and they had a new idea, which would be to experiment with using these particular yen. And here's the 100 yen, valuable enough that you probably only find it wrapped like this. And they would use these yen instead for the American soldiers and so forth, and whoever's working with them in their military bases in and around Japan and the various islands south and southeast of Japan. Okay, and they would be held only by the American, soldiers, whereas the B yens originally intended for Japan would be what the normal people of Japan would use. So there'd be the 10 sen and the 50 sen. Oh, look at that, there was. Okay. The 50 cents. See, these are all B's. Interestingly enough, these are much more common precisely because they circulated very widely among the ordinary citizens of Japan for that period of time. And here's the 5 yen. See, so the B's are much more common, but they otherwise seem to look pretty much the same. Now, there's one other small thing about these, is that you notice these always have an A at the beginning and the end of their serial number. And that's true for all of these, and I think that's true for all the ones that I have. Yeah. If there's if they had to redo any, that the first A would be an H. So, but all of these here are, sort of like a star note, but all of these here are not like that. These are just the B's. That's interesting. There's not only the frame B here and here, but a little tiny B there. I never noticed that before. The A has an A as well as the frame empty A's here. And then finally, the 100 yen. Unlike the A's, these are not so bad. And all of these things seem to be named Series 100. But anyway, these were used by the Japanese for a period of time. And so that was the way the Americans could kind of provide some sort of a spending currency for the locals once we'd taken over. And as I said, these ANs found a use that would lead to the next item in this series, where we will talk about what we call military payment certificates, in which they are paid only to our soldiers and others working closely with them on the base as their salary or spending money, and they would be changed every now and then. Even these A-yens, they were issued on July 19 of 1946, and September 30 they were replaced with the first phase of the military payment certificates, which we will see in the next video. So that's a lot of these things. Now, apparently there's another issue of the Italian ones, where there'll be 1943A. I've already indicated the French have another run of the print run where they don't put the flag on the back. And I don't know of the printing history of the Austrian ones, and the Germans I've already explained that we got them coming from two places, and they are given special numbers for what part of the German, occupied German, which ally it would be connected to. Anyway, that's what we have for the allied currency. And well, like I said, some of the German ones were made in Russia, and some of these others would come to be printed either locally or some other place. But the initial runs were pretty much American. So that's kind of, or at least American made, I should say. So that's all I have to say on those.